I've seen Ma Long preparing to step around, only to see the ball as short backspin and immediately switch to a deceptive flick. Today, we're going to talk about the forehand flick for short balls. There are several types of flicks. Let me demonstrate them for you first. The first type is the deceptive flick. With this technique, you can flick any backspin ball. The second is the spin flick, which uses friction. The third is the push flick, where you essentially push the ball forward. The fourth is the power flick, used against sidespin topspin serves. Let's start with the most basic flick. When I was young, my coach told me you could only flick topspin, not backspin. But with technical advancements, backspin balls can now be flicked using the deceptive flick or by adding spin. When your opponent serves a sidespin topspin ball, the goal of the flick is to generate speed. A good flick has a small motion, but by placing it wide and using deception, it's very difficult for the opponent to time and defend. For a standard sidespin topspin flick, first learn the wrist action with me. It's the same for both penhold and shakehand grips. You must cock your wrist back. This ensures a stable racket angle, which provides more control when dealing with topspin sidespin. If you don't cock your wrist back, you'll create too much arc, and the flick will go off the table. During the backswing, at contact, and on the follow-through, keep that wrist cocked back. This keeps the racket face stable and allows for a power flick. This way, you can generate power and execute a high-quality flick. To achieve a flick so fast the opponent can't react, a lethal flick. Where does the power come from? The speed is generated by drawing the wrist back and then snapping it forward. Your technique must be precise. This power doesn't come from the forearm. Many players flick topspin balls off the table because they use too much forearm. The power must come from the wrist, snapping back and then forward, like the flick of a fish's tail. So, we cock the wrist back slightly and generate power from back to front. But during the flick, should the racket angle change? Let me share my personal feel. I initially keep my racket angle fixed. But if the incoming ball is too bouncy, a fixed angle will send it long. At that moment, I'll add a slight downward pressing motion at the instant of contact. Many players stick to the fixed motion their coach taught them. This is incorrect. You must adjust based on the incoming ball. If you find your flick goes long whenever you try to add power, it's likely because the opponent's short serve is very bouncy. In this case, to get speed without going long, close your racket face at the very end of the stroke. This allows you to still execute high-quality flicks during a match. The second technique is the push flick. The push flick is mainly used to handle semi-spin or no-spin balls. Because if you use the power flick on these balls, you'll very likely hit the net. So, the push flick is for situations where you can't read the spin clearly. It's a neutral ball handling technique. This type of ball is very common in matches. For the push flick, the wrist action is the same as a regular flick. You must cock the wrist back. With the push flick, your wrist doesn't need to snap back and forth like the power flick's fishtail motion. Precisely because it doesn't use wrist movement, it's easier to control the trajectory and placement. Your wrist should not move back and forth or up and down. If the ball has more backspin, use your forearm to push slightly upwards. Note that the wrist itself isn't rotating. You must remember this. The motion is not like this, wrist rotation, but like this, led by the forearm. When the ball has some spin, my forearm moves forward and slightly upward. When there's no spin, my forearm just moves forward. This is the essence of the push flick. You can use the push flick against sidespin topspin, but the power flick is better, as the push flick won't produce a high enough quality return. The push flick is for when you can't read the spin, whether it's backspin, topspin, no spin, or sidespin topspin versus sidespin backspin. In this situation, I lock my wrist and push straight through the ball. This makes the return more stable. The third key point, your shoulder and elbow shouldn't be high. Keep them down. When you cock your wrist back, they will naturally drop. See? Now you're creating a threat by accelerating with your forearm. The push flick needs to be combined with good placement. Since it lacks an aggressive striking motion, the speed won't be very high. So, we mainly use placement and angle to make the opponent uncomfortable. For example, if the opponent is standing still after the serve, flick to that spot. The moment they move, flick to the other side. The push flick is very consistent because there's minimal change in racket angle, making it easy to control the direction. If you feel some spin on your racket, lift slightly upward. If there's not much spin, push more forward. It's very stable. Why cock the wrist back? Because without it, you can't generate force. For a short ball, cocking the wrist back is necessary to push forward. Fourth key point, for a power flick against side spin topspin, should you be close to or far from the ball? A power flick requires creating space between you and the ball. Use this space to give your wrist room to snap. For a push flick, however, you need to be close to the ball. Get to the ball first. But both types of flicks should be executed at the peak of the bounce. The third type, let's learn the deceptive flick. This is one of Ma Long's signature shots. He can flick even the heaviest backspin. Let me tell you, for in-table techniques, there is no single, best shot. With in-table play, having more variety is what deceives opponents, because it's not purely a power-based game. You can't solve problems just with power and speed, so we must rely on variation. You need to add some trick shots. The deceptive flick is too slow for pros, but it's very effective for amateurs because the ball comes back heavy, and using it occasionally will throw off your opponent's timing. What's the purpose of the deceptive flick? It's mainly for dealing with backspin. Because if you use it on topspin, the ball will fly long before you can close the racket face. The same problem exists for no-spin balls. It's also easy to send it long if you try to add power, so don't attempt that casually. You can use the opponent's incoming spin. The more spin, the easier it is to execute. When I was practicing this, I always struggled with the timing. If I opened the racket face too much before closing it, the ball would fly long. If I didn't open it enough and rushed to close it, I'd hit the net. So the ratio of opening and closing must be balanced. The two motions must be perfectly synchronized. In slow motion, it looks like this. Contact the ball with this open racket angle, and simultaneously, as you move forward, flip the racket face closed. The resulting ball is quite heavy. Start with a pushing motion. This racket angle won't be affected by the backspin. Then, press down on the ball spin. This ensures it clears the net without going long. It looks like a wrist flip, but it's actually executed by the forearm. I've tried using only the wrist, but the speed and length are insufficient, creating no threat and giving the opponent an easy chance to loop me. So, I must use my forearm to execute the flip. The wrist should be locked, moved by the forearm, transforming from a push motion to a flick with a closed racket face. Try to use the deceptive flick on balls with more spin. The initial contact motion must be that of a push. After contacting the ball, while pushing forward through it, then flip the racket to press down. Don't flip too early, or you'll still be affected by the backspin. You must push forward first, then press down. See? The quality of this shot is not bad. Fourth point, this flick can absolutely be used on a falling ball. Normally, if we try to flick a falling ball, we often hit the net. But the deceptive flick works well during the descent. So it doesn't matter if your footwork is late, because you don't need to hit it at the peak. In fact, the lower the ball is, the easier it is to flip. So when you're caught by long and short balls and are slow to a short one, you don't need to worry about missing the peak. You can use the deceptive flick on the descent. I've seen Ma Long prepare to step around, see the ball is short, and immediately switch to a deceptive flick. Penholders can also use the deceptive flick, it's quite easy to do. The fourth type is the spin flick, or the friction flick. This is one I developed myself. For extremely spinny balls, a normal flick just goes into the net. My main rival, a lefty, always served this heavy backspin. If I pushed it, she would loop either corner very quickly. So, I figured out this method to deal with it. This shot can only be flicked cross-court. During the flick, drop the racket head to its lowest point and let your wrist hang. Then, take an outside arc and brush the ball inside the table. This method is for heavy backspin, not sidespin topspin. For sidespin topspin, I would use the power flick with a locked wrist. The key is to hang the wrist and flick the side of the ball. I'm actually contacting the side of the ball, not the back. The second key is to push with your fingers. By scooping under the ball like this, you can create a wide angle. This shot is for when a push would leave me in a very passive position. The key is to focus on creating friction. When I hang my wrist down and brush the side of the ball, the motion is almost entirely about friction. When the opponent's serve is very spinny, a burst of power from your fingers will help lift the ball over the net. Your finger pressure must be very focused. Penholders should find this easier, as they can hang their wrist more extremely, allowing for more friction. Relatively speaking, the power is more concentrated. Let's review the 4 principles of the flick. First, the more spin on the ball, or the more you just want to get the flick on the table, the closer you need to be to the ball. For example, if the goal is just to land the flick, get a little closer to the ball for better control. Being close to the ball means not creating a large space between your racket and the ball at contact. Get just a little bit closer to the ball. The more power you want to generate, the farther you need to be from the ball to create space. To ensure the flick lands, should your wrist be more active or more stable? Of course, it should be stable. The more it moves, the less consistent you'll be. Although the wrist is crucial for in-table techniques, on critical points, a more active wrist leads to less precise control. That's why the push flick is always the most stable flicking technique. For topspin balls, what is our main focus when flicking? Spin, speed, placement, or power? It's speed. That's correct. Because with sidespin topspin, it's easier to keep the trajectory down and accelerate. What about backspin? For backspin, the focus is placement. Excellent answer. Some might say the focus is the flip motion, but that's wrong. The deceptive flick is just one method, not the main principle. If the opponent's backspin serve is very heavy and I still want to flick it, I will definitely prioritize placement. The opponent serves, and you don't know if it's topspin or backspin. As a general rule, just flick forward. Meaning, move your forearm straight forward. If you find the ball goes into the net, adjust by using your forearm to drive forward and upward. If you find it goes long, adjust by using your forearm to drive forward and downward. You absolutely do not use the wrist to adjust the arc. You use the forearm to adjust direction and trajectory.